Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. If you've ever looked at software development and felt completely overwhelmed by the jargon, especially the term object-oriented programming, trust me, you're not alone. Historically, coding was done through procedural programming, which basically meant writing one long, continuous block of code, and yeah, it got messy fast. So today, we are taking the seemingly abstract world of object-oriented programming, or OOP, and breaking it down into super simple, everyday analogies for beginners. By the end of this, you're going to see how structuring your code around real-world entities makes programming not just incredibly efficient, but actually really intuitive. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Blueprints versus real things. 2. Bringing objects to life. 3. Demystifying the self keyword. 4. Avoiding common OOP mistakes. And 5. The power of inheritance. Section 1. Blueprints versus real things. Like I mentioned, early programming was often this tangled web of procedural instructions. To escape that mess, we really rely on two foundational concepts, the class and the object. Think of a class as purely a logical blueprint or template. It defines the structure and the capabilities of something, but, and this is absolutely crucial to remember, it doesn't actually occupy any memory space on its own. An object, on the other hand, is the physical instance created from that class. It's the concrete reality that actually holds data and takes up memory in your computer when the program runs. Let's put that in perspective. Think about smartphones. The abstract idea of a smartphone, the engineer's blueprint saying it needs a screen, a battery, and a camera, that is your class. You obviously can't make a phone call on a piece of paper, right? It uses zero memory. But the actual physical iPhone or Samsung Galaxy in your pocket, that is the object. You could have millions of physical objects out there, all with different wallpapers or varying battery levels, but they were all instantiated from that single abstract blueprint. Section 2. Bringing objects to life. Now that we have the theory down, how do we bridge the gap between these everyday analogies and the actual programming terminology? Well, it's pretty amazing how perfectly our real-world logic maps directly onto the intimidating coding jargon. Let's use a car as an example. The blueprint for the car is our class. The specific properties of the car, like its paint color or its brand name, are called attributes. In code, attributes are really just variables that belong to the object. Finally, the actions the car can perform, like driving or braking, those are called methods. And methods are simply functions defined inside the class. It's the exact same logic you use to navigate the physical world, just translated into code. So, to actually pull this off in our code, we follow what's basically a simple builder's journey. Step 1, define the class. You write the code that creates the blueprint, outlining all your attributes and methods. Step 2, instantiate the object. This is where memory is finally allocated, and your abstract idea becomes a concrete data structure. It's building the car. Step 3, call the method. You tell that specific object to do something, like telling your newly built car to drive. The main takeaway here, you absolutely must create the object first before you can use any of the class features. Section 3, demystifying the self keyword. If you're coding in Python, you are going to see the word self pop up everywhere inside your classes. It is notoriously confusing for beginners, but it solves a very real practical problem. Think about this. If we build 100 identical cars from our blueprint, and we want to paint just one of them red, how on earth does the programming language know exactly which car's paint attribute to change? Well, that's where self comes in. The crucial point is that self refers to the current object you are working with. When you call a method on an object, Python automatically passes that specific object as the very first argument behind the scenes. This is exactly what prevents you from accidentally painting all your cars red. It connects your unique instance back to the class structure, so each object maintains its own independent data. And here's a fun fact. Self isn't even a strict required keyword in Python. It's purely a naming convention. You could technically use any word like this or me, but sticking to self makes your code readable to other developers. Section 4, avoiding common OOP mistakes. Okay, let me share a quick cautionary tale that will save you hours of frustrating debugging. Imagine a developer building an animal class. They create a dog object and a cat object, and they want each pet to learn tricks. So they create an empty list called tricks. They teach the cat to sleep and roll over. But then they check the dog object, and the dog suddenly knows how to do the cat's tricks. Why in the world did that happen? Well, our developer made a classic mistake that created a massive bug. They define the tricks variable directly underneath the class name. In Python, doing that doesn't create a private space for each animal. It creates a shared global class variable. So every single animal they created was sharing the exact same list of tricks. Not good. The right way to do this is to use a special constructor method called init, which is short for initialize. The init method is called automatically the exact moment an object is created. By defining your variables inside init and using that handy self keyword we just learned about, you guarantee that the data belongs exclusively to that specific instance. Your dog gets its own empty list, and your cat gets its own empty list. Boom, problem solved. Section 5. The power of inheritance. One of the absolute greatest benefits of object-oriented programming is that it stops you from constantly reinventing the wheel. Inheritance allows us to create new classes, called subclasses or child classes, that automatically inherit all the attributes and methods of an existing parent class. Just like a human child inherits traits from their parents, our objects can inherit behaviors while still adding their own unique twists to the mix. Let's say you're building a company database. You create a parent class called employee with attributes for a name, an email address, and a salary. But later on, you realize you need a specific category for your engineers. Instead of writing all that code over again from scratch, you simply create a child class called developer. The developer class automatically inherits the name, email, and salary structure, but now you can add a brand new attribute just for them, like programming language. This dramatically reduces code duplication and keeps your program beautifully simple as it scales. To wrap up our journey today, I want you to remember this powerful quote from our source material. A class defines possibilities, and objects make them happen. I just love that. It hits the nail on the head. Classes organize our thoughts and structure our data, but it's the objects that bring our applications to life and actually do the work. Before you go, I want to leave you with a quick challenge to really solidify what you've learned. Look around the room you're sitting in right now. Pick 3 everyday items. How would you separate them into abstract classes with defined attributes versus the concrete objects sitting right in front of you? Think about what attributes they have and what methods they can perform. It's a fun little exercise to train your brain to think in OOP. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. Keep exploring and happy coding.